I'm joined by our guests. In Tel Aviv, Gideon Levy, columnist at Haaretz News. On Skype from Harare, Richard Falk, Professor Emeritus at Princeton University. And in Ramallah, Nour Odeh, political analyst and former spokesman for the Palestinian Task Force on Public Diplomacy. Welcome to you all. I want to start with Richard Falk in Harare. What on earth are the White House doing making Israeli policy?
There is no coherent, persuasive answer. It would seem that the timing of this shift on the settlements came as a way of helping Netanyahu overcome the political impasse in Israel. But there's no assurance that they even correlated this initiative with anything that adds up to a coherent policy.
Do you think it's a question of this is a continuation of traditional US policies, or is this a complete about turn?
Well, I'd say it's somewhere in between. I think George W. Bush back in 2004 seemed to agree with Sharon that the settlement blocks would have to be incorporated into Israel when a final agreement was reached. But there was never any explicit departure from the international consensus, which is that these settlements are unlawful and that they are a breach of the Fourth Geneva Convention, Article 49. And the fact that the U.S. expresses a political opinion that they now are legal has no real weight beyond its geopolitical leverage. It has no legal significance.
Let me bring in Ramallah here and Nour Odeh. Nour, what's the Palestinian reaction to this? Palestinians have long said that this administration isn't a partner for peace. We're still just going to continue down that line, or has there been stronger reaction to this?
The Trump administration has an ideological alliance with the settler movement in Israel, and that's long been clear for the Palestinian side, who've considered the Trump administration part of the problem since the declaration on Jerusalem less than a year after Trump took office. I think what's most dangerous is that those who still make the argument and the case for international law in light of a very still timid international reaction will be under fire in Palestine because nobody seems, this agenda of international law doesn't seem to be having much of a backbone or support internationally beyond the rhetorical.
Let me bring in Gideon Levy here in Tel Aviv. Has this handed Netanyahu the government?
Look, directly, I don't think it will have an immediate effect. Netanyahu is struggling now. His supporters will be very happy with this step. The others will not understand it. Professor Falk is saying that by the end of the day, we are dealing with an international law. And this American administration has nothing to do with the international law, and therefore it has some political influence, but I don't think it has any legal effect.
It may not have any legal effect, but there is, Gideon, an enforcement effect. If one of the most influential countries on the planet says, okay, this isn't illegal anymore, it makes it very difficult to try and enforce the law.
Yeah, but Imran, you see, it's now 52, 53 years that nobody bothered to implement the law, and Israel could ignore the international law very easily. And by the end of the day, the settlements are there with the approval of the international law or without it. And we have to think about a new discourse, namely the one-state solution, which is the only solution left.
Nour Odeh and Ramallah, is it time for a one-state solution?
I think what needs to be done, what we all need to focus on, is how these policies and practices of Israel can be made costly for Israel. Israel will continue to advance racist policies, will continue to treat 20% of its population, the Palestinian Israelis, as 10th-class citizens. Adding to that, the Palestinians in the occupied territory is not going to change policy unless Israel is compelled to do that. I think in many ways what Trump is doing is forcing the hand of those who still think that laws count for something to defend them, because the implication of what Trump did, or the Trump administration did last night, doesn't stop at the borders of Israel and Palestine. I think it goes well beyond that. And if the policies of Israel are made costly, if this occupation, this racism, this colonization is made costly, then talking about a solution, regardless of the formula, will become possible. Otherwise, we will continue to have the status quo of one-state reality, where Palestinians are oppressed, denied basic human rights, denied civil rights, denied their own existence even. And I have to point out, I didn't really see any difference between Netanyahu and Gantz in welcoming the Trump administration's announcement. And that says a lot. It says a lot about a political system that has been emboldened and taken over by the settlement agenda. That's what we have right now in Israel. And unless that changes by policies, by actions from other states, I don't see how talk of any solution is worth any energy.
Well, let's bring in Richard Falk here. It's interesting what Nour Odeh is saying about the idea of other states. What's the international community's next move?
Well, I suspect the next move will be similar to the next move after the U.S. moved the American embassy to Jerusalem. There will be a General Assembly resolution condemning this latest Trump move. And one should remember, one thing that hasn't been mentioned is that Trump often does these foreign policy initiatives for the sake of domestic politics, particularly in view of the election in a year from now. International issues come very secondary for him. And it's true, as was said, that he's against any kind of legal structure in international affairs. He withdrew from the Iran nuclear agreement. He torpedoed the Paris climate change agreement. I don't think he has any kind of coherent strategy that is tied to this latest outrage. And I agree completely with what Gideon said, that we're faced now with the reality of which one-state solution is going to prevail. And those of us that favor a legal and moral and even spiritual solution favor a democratic, secular state that treats both peoples equally.
Gideon, let me bring you in here. Is there a way out of this for the left in Israel, for the moderates?
Imran, who are the moderates in Israel? I mean, it was just mentioned that the leader of the so-called moderates reacted exactly the same to the American administration's step, like Benjamin Netanyahu. Very little is being left, from the Israeli real left. Very little can be expected from the Zionist left, who tries to gain everything from everything, to pay some lip service for peace, for justice, and to do exactly the same steps like the Likud. By the end of the day, we have to realize that Israel as a whole is today very much on the nationalistic, religious, right-wing pole, and the expectations that a peace camp or a change will come from within Israel cannot be met, because there is no incentive for any kind of change from within Israel.
Nour Odeh here in Ramallah. Nour, there's no Americans anymore for the Palestinians, at least as a peace broker. Is there a potential Palestinian partner, a peace broker, an honest broker, or are you all out of options now?
No, I don't think that you're ever out of options. I think this is a very critical juncture for the Palestinians. I think overall, this is perhaps one of the most difficult periods we've gone through in decades, given the dismal state of Arab affairs and the fact that countries whose continued leadership or continued existence of the regimes are dependent on the mercy of Donald Trump, who requires good relations with Israel. What we need, in my opinion, is an alliance of the like-minded internationally. What is happening right now is a wave, a tsunami of hostility towards rules and regulations and laws. These laws govern a lot more than the inadmissibility of the acquisition of territory by force, which is in the UN Charter. It governs everything from trade to bilateral relations to movement of people, movement of goods. The whole system through which we all operate depends on making sure that it continues to work. I think there's an opportunity for the Palestinians to harness this concern worldwide about the Trump administration and to push for bolder positions from countries, for more courageous positions, if you will. I think countries should take the lead from Ireland, from Sweden, from many countries that have been very clear on where they stand in terms of the illegality of settlements, in terms of what settlement products mean. And we need to see more of those actions. This occupation, these policies of the right in Israel have to have consequences. The occupation has to hurt Israel in order for Israel to do something about it.
Nour, thank you very much for that. We are running out of time, but I do very quickly just want to ask one last question to Richard Falk. Is there an option for the Palestinians, for the Israelis, for another partner if the US is simply going to take this road? Is there anybody else?
Not at the moment, but I think one thing we can say is that civil society and the BDS campaign and pressures from below are perhaps the most relevant short-term political way to support the Palestinian national struggle. I think diplomacy is really at a dead end. It can have a short-term effect of criticizing what Pompeo and Trump have just done, but it won't change anything fundamentally.
I want to thank all our guests, Gideon Levy, Richard Falk and Nour Odeh, and thank you too for watching.